Okay, we are recording.
I made my I made my screen go to full screen. Oh, there. Which means I can't get back. There it is. Okay. And the poll is anonymous, so we don't know anybody's answers. We just see the aggregate. Has anyone heard from Deborah? I see she's logged in, but I don't think she's.
I think she had something right up to the meeting time.
Oh,
let's see.
Right. Well, she's showing up here. Do you see her on yours?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. Hi, Terry.
Hi, Terry. I think you're muted, so if you want us to hear you, we can't.
Let's see.
Oh, good. There's Janet.
You guys can use the chat if there's any issue with your audio. Also, there's a chat box at the bottom.
And you can send the chat to any one person or to all of us, or so those of you just joined, we have a poll for you to take while we're waiting for everybody to join. And let's see, Anna, do you know, there's Michelle.
So many people. There we go.
So do you have an idea if we have everybody here, or?
Yeah, I think pretty much based on who RSVP'd. Maybe we'll wait like 2 more minutes.
We still have a couple minutes. Ah, there's Hannah.
Molly, do you usually have everyone mute themselves during the meeting, or?
Yeah, it works well, especially if you have background noise, to mute yourself unless you're wanting to say something, which if you speak without unmuting yourself, we won't hear you, but we'll quickly tell you that we can't hear you, so then you can unmute. It takes just a little practice to make it smooth, but if you're in a really quiet spot and not blowing your nose or coughing or wiggling your keyboard, then it's fine to be unmuted. Hi, Hannah.
Sorry, I was muted there. Hello.
That's all right. Good. Oh, good.
Oh yeah, Kate Buckman too. Yeah.
Nice. So I'm thinking maybe we should start. What do you think?
Let's do it.
So we only allocated an hour, so we'll see how it goes. This is our first try for this format and strategy, so let us know how it goes and whether you want more of them or what. So those of you who just joined, there is a little poll there. It's one question. And when it looks like we have everybody responded, we'll end the poll and take a look at the results. So, so our idea for this is that this is really a chance for you guys to raise questions or any problems you're having, ask the kind of question that others might be struggling with. We've had several teachers communicate with questions along the way, both last year and this year. And so as a jumping off point, we can share some of those questions and go through kind of a combination of how to use Tuva and or data literacy strategies, depending on what you guys need. So let me just check my little agenda here. Before we get started, is there any other kind of thing in particular that any of you would like to make sure we can cover in this 1 hour that we have? And I think you should have a button at the bottom that says raise my hand, but you can just, speak up too at any point. Okay, well, speak up at any point and we'll just jump in. So I have a few things that we can review about Tuva tools. And we can also cover some basic concepts and strategies for data skills. But I thought we'd start with Michelle Bailey, but it's not Bailey now. It's maybe you can unmute Michelle and correct mine.
Yeah, it's Brzezowski now.
Brzezowski, thank you. So Michelle has very kindly offered to just talk to us a little bit about what she's done, and I just sort of open the floor to her. She's used Tuva in the classroom, and well, I'll let you speak. So, and Michelle, if you want to share your screen, you know how to do that?
I don't know if it would be super helpful, but I don't know how. It's probably not that difficult to figure out.
So at the bottom of the screen, this is for anybody, in fact, if you have something you want to show, at the bottom of the screen, you see a green thing in the middle that says share. And if you click that and then pick a screen, if you have more than one that you want everybody else to see, that way we'll all be able to see your screen. So
those options down below disappeared. I don't know where they went.
If you hover over them, they should come back up. Like just hover over the bottom of the screen or move your mouse around or something.
Huh.
No. I also am not sure. Is anyone else seeing the share screen? You might have to be you are. Okay, good.
Yeah.
okay,
Cool.
Has everybody taken the poll? Yes?
Yeah, but I was super quick to do it. I don't think I actually read all the choices.
Okay, that's all right. So maybe we can end the poll so that disappears screen. And well, while you're centering your thoughts, Michelle, I'm going to hit share results so we can see what the issues are. Everybody see that?
Oh, yeah.
So it looks like a pretty even spread. Did some people say 0 for all of them? Looks like we have 1 out of 7, 1 out of 7. Oh, it's really different for everybody.
I thought we were supposed to choose one.
What's that, John?
I thought we were supposed to choose one, so I chose the one thing I thought was.
Oh,
That's
okay.
what I thought.
Oh, okay. It wasn't clear. It does say multiple choice, but you could have picked any that apply. I think it would let you do that. But it looks like it's not enough time on everybody's list. Maybe you can nod.
Well, I actually just selected that because I needed to pick something because there wasn't a submit button until you selected something.
Oh,
And so that seemed like the least problematic because I'm actually not having trouble in any area, but I needed to pick something. So that's the lucky candidate.
okay, that's great. That's good feedback to have. Oh, yeah, this is a pretty limited poll thing. So maybe we don't learn that much from it. But it's interesting that everybody picked one that was fairly different. So, okay, let's jump to Michelle. I'm going to
Okay.
stop sharing that and make
I did fix my screen so I see at the bottom now. I had to go up to a window in case anybody, it happens to them. I clicked on window and clicked on always show meeting controls. So now I can share screen if I need to. But I guess from what I understand, what you wanted me to share was just that how I introduced Tuva to the class.
Yeah, which any of those prompts that work for you, but whatever whatever you'd like to share that you think would be useful to others that worked for you.
Okay, so I used the sort of canned introductory lessons that are in Tuva. There's a super simple one that's just called Man's Best Friend, and I walked through some of those. Yeah, they're canned because they're Tuva lessons that are in there, but it gave the kids an introduction to how to use the program to begin with and how to organize data and how to ask questions of a relatively random data list. And so once we did 2 or 3 of those, and I did use the classroom feature in Tuva, I really liked the program for that. I'm going to use it this year, not with the Arsenic program itself, but use some of the other lessons that are in there with my content this year. Basically, here's a data set and the kids figure out how to ask questions of the data set. So I really liked doing that myself. And then, so that's how I introduced Tuva. It did work well with a lot of the kids. Some of the kids, they were a little disengaged because it wasn't our data. And here at Trenton, when we did get to looking at the well water data, it was a little bit of a bummer too, because we started that process before our results were in, which was also a little difficult. Some of the kids were like, but this isn't my water. Like, why do I care? So that was a challenge that I had last year too. But I would still start with some of those smaller data sets with the lessons that are in Tuva. I really just think it was a good introductory thing to do it. And I haven't used it yet this year. My time has just been stretched too thin. And so now I realize, I need to get back to that because there are some nice lessons in there for the life sciences content that I'm doing this year. So I really liked it for that feature. Anyway, what I really liked about it when I did it, and let's see if I can share my screen. After, and of course, now my battery light just came on. So if I try to share screen, let's see if this works. Oh, I have all these options. Oh my goodness. Okay, this is the one that I want. Let's see if this works. Can you see what I'm looking at here?
Yes.
So this was I shared this too last year at a program at the biolab. But once they got used to being able to ask a question of a data set, even if they weren't going to get an answer, or even if the question didn't appear to be largely important, I really felt like it's just really important to help the kids see how to ask any question of data, even if it's really, really simple, personally. And so this is the one that I did. These first 3 slides was my example. So I did it as a claim, evidence, and reasoning, and here's my super long right up here. But the kids just asked, well, does well type matter? And they would make a claim just from kind of looking it over. They would have sort of a hypothesis. And then I used the saving of the graph feature that they came up with. The disappointing thing that we've been through a couple times is that we can't change this text size, which I know we've talked about. It's come up last year that this text size down here is really small. Whoops. So this was the slideshow that my students made. Each of them had a question, a claim, evidence and reasoning. And this really did work pretty well. I liked doing it. I think the kids could start to get some of those skills for how to ask questions of data and how to build these graphs. So basically that's what I did last year in my room, and it worked really well. I also did have a lot of already experience playing around with Tuva from a summer program I did a few years ago when I first met Molly. And we learned how to, I can't remember if this kid did this in Tuva or did it on Google Slides, but saving the graphs in Google Slides and then editing it or adding to it from here really worked well for us too, to be able to share out that information that they learned. So that's pretty much all I have that I can think of right now. If something comes up or if somebody has a question for how I use certain things of the classroom, I could be, maybe have an answer, but maybe not. I haven't really used it much this year or at all yet this year, so.
No, that's a great jumping off point, and it's nice to see some examples of some of the questions that your students asked.
Yeah.
Before I jump in, so this is a really nice way to lead into just a couple of slides I made to, again, stimulate some thinking. Does anybody else have anything in particular they would like to share that they have tried?
I don't know if I'm ready to share it, but I'd used the Tuva program with density of Penny Lab with my applied kids. And by making the pair of students one of the attributes, then it was, even though some of them did a terrible job getting the volume of a penny, so their densities were all over the place. When you looked at the whole set, it didn't really show like there was that much of a pattern. Even with pre-1982 and post-1982, which is when pennies changed their composition. But once you put the color to the points so that you could see which students, then it became really clear that everybody's pennies density went down after 1982. You could see, relatively speaking, relative to the size that they had, it worked out. You could also see it nicely if you just didn't do density and just did mass. And then the kids figured that out also, that you could just do the mass and see the change at 1982 nicely. But anyways, that's one thing I did with it that worked out nicely.
Was that one of the first things they did with Tuva, or had you done any?
No, I did the introductory lesson with the dogs before we did that.
Yeah. Okay.
A while before we did that, we came back to the pennies when it seemed appropriate to use it. So.
Okay. Good. Anybody else? Well, let me share just a few slides to kind of get us back to some of the things that we talked about in the summer and to introduce this idea of questions, which, since often investigations start with a question, I know it's really hard to help students ask good questions and ones that are really viable given a data set. So I'm going to try sharing my screen here, and let's see if I can make this work. Let's see, how do I show the slideshow? I'm not familiar with Google. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Let's see, view slide presentation, present here. Maybe this will work. So just thinking back to the workshop, maybe I can make this go away. So, oops. How do I go back? It's just
Does
going.
anybody know if you can split the screen so you can see us, but also see the whole slide?
Oh, yeah. I don't know how to do that. Let's see. Well, I think I can scroll forward this way. Yeah, oops, back. It's not going to go back. Anyway, 3 aspects for supporting students. There's the technology part, which is, in this case, not just Tuva, but also working in the Google Sheets, any data that your students collect, it's that side of it too. But primarily here, we'll talk about the Tuva side. It's access to data, which we have the drinking water data set, so we'll focus on that. But then it's also the teaching support, the pedagogy, what strategies can you use? And so I just want to remind you on number 2 that we do have a lot of help. So there's help for how to use Tuva, and there's help for data literacy strategies and ways to probe the data. And then sort of your side of it is to have a critical mind, to ask, to share what you're doing with others, and to question. So in the box on the right over here, these files will take you to probably the most consolidated sources of help. So these resource links are from the workshop, and I've added a few. And they're sorted by, is it Tuva you need help with? Is it data literacy? Is it arsenic data set stuff? And then all of that folder, that file is in this shared SEPA Tuva folder. And that's where you'll find a lot of this stuff from the last workshop. So the duckweed data that we gathered, all the things from there are in that folder. So, and then I'm trying to post every few weeks a discussion board post with a data literacy tip. Now that we've floated the survey, the the student diagnostic survey that you all took, I'll start posting some more discussion board posts about data literacy, so that those just might be tips that come in handy. And then if this webinar works and is useful to you, we can do it a few more times in the spring, and sort of leave it as an open door work session where you can bring your questions and problems and ideas. So the third reminder is to frame clear questions to drive the analysis. And if there was one data literacy strategy that I could communicate, it would be this one: to really pose your investigations with a really clear question. And so the bullets here are some of the questions we've gotten from teachers about how to use Tuva, or how to work with data, or how to work with the arsenic data set. Anything from how can I make fonts larger, which is now possible in Tuva, and I can show you how. What skills do students need to get started? What's the good first thing to do with the data set? Or more about the data itself. How can we show the average arsenic level wells in our school? We've had that question. And I'm sure the teacher had in mind this kind of bar graph, because that's what we're all used to making, is averaging everything and making a bar. And then how do we make a pie chart with proportions of wells in each category? And this is a great question because it involves a little bit of fancy footwork, but it's very doable. And we'll talk about that. So just for the question of, so this is where the more you can refine questions, or students can refine questions to be about the data, the easier it will be, I think. So here, this question, how do we show the average arsenic level in our schools, really stemmed from just wanting to make this particular graph. But if you rephrase the question as what you really want to find is, how do the concentrations of arsenic compare in wells of different school districts, then you can, this kind of graph will even more than answer your question, because here you're now looking at the whole distribution. And this is, this is what Tuva it allows you to do that students hadn't been able to do before in Google Sheets or Word. So that's an example of refining your question. And with this one, the question was, how do we make a pie chart with proportions? And it's a great question. And what it's asking is pretty much the same thing. What proportion of our wells at school have safe, marginal, and very high levels of arsenic? And this was what the idea was. So Tuva does make that graph, and you do it by using making a derived attribute, which we'll go through in a moment, so you can see how this kind of graph can be made. So those are just examples of where just trying to really clarify the question so that it informs how you proceed with using Tuva or with analyzing the data. So these links are on the sidebar, I think, in your chat. Is that right, Anna?
Yeah, they're not bit.ly links. Not all of them. Some of them
Okay.
are really long, but yes, they're there.
That's okay. Either these links, and this slideshow we will put in that shared folder as well, so you can go back and look at this. So I'm gonna stop this share for a moment and check in about sort of any questions or directions that you would like to go at this point. So I can go ahead and demonstrate how to make a derived attribute, because I think that's a really useful tool that, and let me go to the arsenic data set. See, escape that. And now I'm going to share my screen again. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
So I have noticed in the last day or two that the data set is loading a little bit slower than usual, but it seems to work fine. So first, Michelle raised the problem about fonts. So let me just quickly show you how to do that. Let's limit this data set to look at just 2 schools. Or let's just look at make the pie chart for 1 school. And yes, this is going pretty slow. So I'm going to clear all the schools away, and let's look at a different school than what my example was. Let's look at, we've got a lot of, we can look at, I don't know if anybody's here from this high school, but we'll try it. And the fact that I have the Vimeo or Zoom on, I don't know if that's slowing it down as well. But so I'm just going to look at 1 school here. I've eliminated all the others, and let's ask the question: what are the proportion of schools that are over or under the EPA limit? And is this school in, where is Kearsarge High School?
New Hampshire.
New Hampshire. Okay, so we'll use the New Hampshire limits on that. So if you scroll down, let's actually, if you scroll down to the bottom of the attribute list and click on the plus sign, you're gonna get a chance to make a new attribute that you can define. And the problem here is arsenic is, arsenic has, all of these analytes have different thresholds for EPA, so we can't make really an attribute. Each one needs its own attribute to define which is above and below the limit. So here we put, and I've got to go get the formula because it's oops, I want to do that. Let's call this ARSENIC, arsenic levels. And what is the, let's get the formula. I'm sorry, I have to jump away here and get the formula, which I happen to have. Oh, nope, that's the support doc. So there is a file that walks through the steps of how to do this. So you don't have to. So we're going to paste this formula, and if anybody is familiar with Boolean terms, that's what this uses, and the file that we made just provides this formula, and you can see where you can change things. So what's the limit in New Hampshire?
5.
5, okay. So we're gonna change 10 to 5, and we're gonna say, so this is essentially saying that we want the arsenic attribute, and actually this may not work because we need the units in there. We're gonna say anything less than 5, we're gonna give the label group 1, less than 5, and it's safe. And then if arsenic is less than, and I'm just arbitrarily picking 30 as a high number to call, anything above 30 is going to be really high. And what's that?
I'm surprised that it's milligrams per liter.
Oh, that's an error. That was from an earlier version. So we'll change that.
There we go.
And thank you. It's a good catch. That was just my goof before. And I think we need to use the arsenic. We're going to have to use this form of arsenic. So I just hit that, and it's going to be, we're going to copy this. I'll change the formula in the, so the attribute is now that, and this attribute is that. Okay, 5 micrograms per liter, micrograms per liter. Everything look okay? We have to take this back out because we just, my keypad is. Okay, so do you see the components of this? It's saying for the arsenic attribute, anything less than or equal to 5, we're going to call safe. For arsenic attribute, anything less than or equal to 30, we're going to call between 11 and up. We need to say between 5 and 30. And then else, we're going to call it 3 is unsafe. So let's see if that works. Hopefully that will give us a okay. And it's thinking. Not sure why that's not going. There it goes. And down here, we have our new attribute called arsenic levels. And now we can drag that and drop it just like any other attribute. So we'll put arsenic levels. Well, actually, we don't want to put it there. We want to just click once on it and click pi. It's going slowly. And it's only giving us 2 categories, so we must have missed something in the formula. So I will go back and correct that formula, but I think you get the idea from this, how to have some sort of analytical control over how the data show up. Any questions about that? Should go back and check the formula. It's just going quite slowly. So I can go back and click the pencil here to to check the formula. And so while it's loading, has anybody tried derived attributes yet? Pencil. Okay, there. Arsenic micrograms per liter. Oh, here, yeah, micrograms per liter. Well, I can't on the fly. I have to look at that more carefully. But in any case, we got 2 of the bins. There are a lot of formulas in here, so you can create numerous different kinds of transformations of the data using this. You can give different kinds of labels if you want. Anyway, that's worth experimenting with.
I think you're just missing the attribute in the number 3 category.
Oh,
you didn't define that it's arsenic.
Okay, all right, great. So that would be, thank you for catching that. Is that, oops, potentially useful? Is that any other, let's see, I was going to show you how to enlarge the fonts, which I will do.
Hey, Molly, if I could, I'm going to ask my question to John. Over the summer, we had, both of us were looking at if there was any correlation between arsenic and any other metals, and some of them were quite low. So I'm wondering if we could mathematically change the attributes to make one value appear larger to see if there's a closer correlation. I wonder if that's the perfect use for that.
Yeah. Yeah, so you could, we've done that in the Tuva data set library. There's one that's hair, links and hair populations. And so all we did was added a new attribute that is the links population times 10. So
Right.
we transformed it, and then that put them in the same scale range, and then they show up on the graph together. So that would be a perfect use for a derived attribute. If you want to make the font, did that get your question, Jim?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. If you want to make the fonts larger, you go to this options icon and go down to font size, and it's set at 12. But I find often either 14 or 16 works for if you want to make an image that's going to show up large in a slide or a screen. And we can slide this over so that we have more room for the legend here. And that'll scrunch up a little. So other options up here are you can change the icon size, you can add grid lines. Michelle, you mentioned that you had a student who did some animations in PowerPoint, and that's fine. That's probably much more flexible, but you can also add annotations here. By going to annotate, you can add an arrow and you can say, look how little there is here. And so, and then you can change the color of those annotations if you want to, students want to kind of make it personalized or more. Oops, I've lost my, for some reason it zoomed. So I don't know how to make it back. Any other questions there? Has anybody started looking at the arsenic data yet? Have you started working with it? Janet, what are you guys doing with it?
Well, I was waiting for after this webinar to do the pie charts. I was the one that asked you on the pie chart, because last year when we were doing our large community event, that's televised. And so trying to project the pie chart without color. So that was particularly nice. And I just noticed in your settings how you were doing the color as well. So the students have looked at the data and have totaled up the arsenic and the uranium. And I will tell you, a strange thing happened. We've never looked at lead before, and one of our students noticed the level of lead, which was, I felt ashamed as having done this for a couple of years and never noticing the lead. The uranium, of course, was a big one that we in Pelham have a concern about, but I had never done the lead, so we're adding that to our community event also this year. Yeah, it's bad.
Really? In a lot of,
Right, so we have a lot of new home developments, and we just never considered that the older homes, of course, younger families are in, and we focused this year on getting the elementary schools, their students, collecting water from them. And we got a fantastic turnout from that because, of course, the parents were a little bit more concerned about what's in their water. And again, uranium has been a shocker, but now we're adding that third pie chart will be in the community event this year.
Mm-hmm. Great. So you could make the same kind of graphs, the proportion of homes over, way over, around, and below for each of those elements.
Right. And we'll color code them green, yellow, and red for okay, which is very small, not so okay, and very bad. Yeah. So the color, thank you very much, because that color was a big component for us.
Yeah, good.
Janet, I just want to add that, and I want to say to everybody that if you would like us at your community events or Kate Buckman, please feel free to reach out to us, give us those dates so we know they're coming, and maybe we can make plans to be there as a backup, especially if you are taking on, some new topics that feel like you could use some backup on. And,
we're very blessed in Pelham in that the Board of Selectmen are very on board and have televised the children each year, and they're very supportive. Having said that, we would, of course, love to have you. We know it's quite the drive. Floor is going to be trying to come down. We're trying to get it sooner rather than later. We've always done it in May before, but now we'll be we're aiming for that middle of February 22nd, something in there, for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, so you're right on top of it. There is so how many of you have trouble with students coming up with good questions or framing questions in a clear way? Has that been a challenge at all?
I find it's always a challenge for especially the lower level kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A strategy there might be to, I put some links on the page of links there at the bottom on strategies for framing questions, language for framing questions, and framing them in similar way to what's in the graph choice chart. So most questions that they're likely to be asking can be tweaked so that they are in one of those formats, whether it's are they comparing groups, like comparing two schools, or are they comparing two elements, or Are they comparing drilled wells versus dug wells? So that those comparison questions, or is there, as Jim was mentioning, is there a relationship between two analytes, or we can't do time series yet because we don't have dates yet, right? So time series questions aren't really fitting for this data set, but there's certainly plenty of other data sets that they can ask that kind of question. And then proportion date questions, as Janet just mentioned.
Well, the time series, our partner at the collegiate level wanted to do time series on the wells that had showed up high last year, but I said I'm not supposed to know which wells, who has which wells, so therefore I can't provide you with that information because I don't have. In reality, I do have the information, but I've never looked at it, and I told people I wasn't going to ever, do that, and that's what the signed release forms say. But he wanted to know so he could go back and look at those high wells, and we haven't really resolved it, other than I haven't given him that information or tried to go to those people for that reason, because all of the stuff said that we were not keeping that information. And I would have to do some digging around to get it, but I could figure it out if I really needed to.
Sure. So Anna or Jane, are there wells that are being sampled the same well last year and this year and maybe next year? Are there going to be time series by what? Not, you don't have to identify whose it is necessarily, but you could just, line them up.
Yeah, so we have a supplement that we got to this NIH grant. And Sarah Hall from College of the Atlantic is primarily working on that. And she's engaging her COA students in going back to wells repeatedly. And she's collaborating with NDI High School a bit on that. And the plan is to somehow get that data set available to teachers as another dimension for analysis and working on data literacy. So we're not quite sure that it'll be tagged to this big data set. Maybe we'll have a separate set of what we're calling seasonal data. And then that'll be available for analysis and comparison across seasons. But it might take us a year, I think, to get a robust set that we feel comfortable and confident with for people to begin looking at. But already there's some interesting trends emerging. She's gone back to some of the same wells twice already.
I think
in wet and dry seasons. And some of the wells in the dry season had twice the arsenic that they did in the wet season.
As far as participants in the project, we don't have a way yet to link people who've taken 2 samples, but we have talked about that. But yeah, it's not a thing yet. So could be in the future.
In my interpretation of what we've told people is correct, right? That they're not, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But a question you could ask is, of all the wells at, say, Waterville High School that we sampled last year, well, it wouldn't be that useful because presumably most of the wells are different wells being sampled. So yeah. So let's see, any other questions? What else are your students doing with the data? Is anybody doing stuff with the data set as we speak, or where are you in your process?
I'm in the process of trying to chase down the last couple of permission slip forms. Kids turned in samples without forms and trying to get some of them. It's driving me crazy, but that's where I'm at. And we're all set to send a bunch of stuff off, just haven't, because I'm trying to get those last couple forms in.
Okay. So it sounds like people haven't necessarily, other than maybe Janet, really started working with the data set yet. Sarah?
I haven't. I literally just sent the samples off. I'm from a very small school, so we didn't have very many, but I got all but one back, which was nice. Oddly, not a single family registered online. So all I have is the paperwork. So, but it's my first time around, so I'll figure out if that's a problem or if there's another approach as I dive into the deep end. But we're kind of doing all our water stuff second semester, and we just finished the semester today with exams, so I haven't gotten started with data yet.
Okay. Yep. Well, this is all good timing then.
Perfect.
Yeah, good. Hannah, did you have any?
Yeah, so we got our data back. We sent in like 50 something samples. It was my outdoor science class went into the freshman biology classes and had them sample their water. And then like my students input that data into Tuva or into the system. And then we got all the data back. And same thing, like we're on a semester schedule and our classes just ended today with our final exams. So like we just had a little bit of time once we got the data back last week to play around in Tuva, and we answered some different questions based on the the list of research questions that were the pre-made questions. And so I had them go in and analyze the data for that. And then we looked at and we analyzed just our class data. Not like the entire data set. We did an additional just with our students in class in just like a Google spreadsheet, looking at the data that way. But we didn't end up graphing that data. We just played around in Tuva with the 2016 to 2019 data set a bit.
Perfect. That's a great approach. And there are also a lot of data sets in the Tuva library that are related to water quality. I know there's one of 2 lakes in Maine, and there's one about dissolved oxygen and temperature. And so you'll find other water quality kinds of data sets. Jim, did you have something?
A couple things. I tried to approach this in a slightly more systematic build-up type of approach because I knew we wouldn't be getting the results back until spring-ish, something like that. And trying to coordinate it. We're shooting for Earth Day as our community presentation, so I still got some time for that one. But I've been forcing the students to get frustrated with Google Sheets so that I can spring on them, hey, now let's try this really cool software and show you how easy it is to use. And then because we've also been looking at in learning the basics about data interpretation. What does this mean? What can you graph, et cetera, et cetera? What goes on the X, what goes on the Y, et cetera, et cetera. So now I feel like I've got a framework that, because we're starting a new semester, like most other people, but I have the same class, unlike Hannah, I can start phase 2, whereas okay, now that we know how basics of data, how can we start asking these questions? So I also went back and early on started introducing QSER, questions, CER, so that I can begin to almost push them off on their own. I feel like we're ready for that. And our results are also back in, and I'm about to submit second round of samples. So I think all in total, we might get 90 from our area. So really very curious. And all the kids are actually interested, as John knows, oh, what's my result? What does it say? Is it back yet? Yeah. So they're chomping at the bit.
Yeah. That's one of the first questions I guess people want to know. So what's my data? How much do I have, and what's it compared to everybody else's? That seems like a good starting point. Any other questions that students are thinking about asking, or so it sounds like many of you are starting out. Lynn, did you have something you wanted to share?
No, you're just coming in and out. We started this week. I just got my 8th graders back, so we just started looking at the data, and they just started asking questions. So the goal now is next step is to think about those questions that they asked and move that into Tuva. We've done Tuva before, so they're familiar with Tuva, so it should be hopefully a pretty smooth transition.
Great. So is this kind of a session useful, and how often, give us a little feedback on how we can support you with this part of it, the data part mainly, and the telling the stories. I've posted a couple of things on the discussion board, and I don't know if those are useful or not, or I mean, any thoughts how we can support you?
Molly, this is Janet.
Yeah.
I asked Jane if we could have this because from the time in the summertime that we do the work to now was a long time. So that first, review there that you gave, the 20 minutes of this is where the attributes are, this is how we can change it. That was what I needed. That was very helpful for me. And again, I am in this right now. We've already looked at the data, so we are going into TUVA. So this was the perfect timing personally for me. If the webinar could even be, I know you're recording this and you said you were going to put this up. So maybe, just reminding us that this webinar is up there. And I think it would be even helpful to show students some of the components of this. I don't know about the video our pictures are showing. I don't know if in the recordings our pictures show, but I just think the webinar itself, because I could post that on Google Classroom and the kids could watch that at night as a homework assignment. And then, after I've introduced TUVA, so they can, one more kind of like tool of look at what you should be doing or what you could be doing.
Mm-hmm. So that's an interesting idea that I don't know if I don't know how if everybody's images shows up in the video or not, but I'm wondering if it might be worth taking, even if I just took a half hour of time and recorded, I can do a Zoom thing and record it while I'm talking. It's really geared for students. I would hate to have students sort of suffer through something that they, and see any little revealing things. So I'm wondering, would that be helpful if maybe just a half-hour video that was about the arsenic? I don't want to give away things and give them questions that then they just take and ask. I want them to think, but maybe using a subset or something that just demonstrates the kinds of things they can do in TUVA with that data set or one like it.
Because you're the expert.
I would rather not have a half an hour one. I'd rather have like 5 minutes or less and hit a couple of, like you could, if you had a series of them that you didn't necessarily have to watch all the pieces, but just here's how to get started, to get into the data and to quickly do something. Here's how to make a pie chart. Here's how to just, because those they're not going to sit there even a half an hour, to be honest.
Absolutely, of course.
5 minutes or less.
Right. Off the top of your head, so some of the topics for those would be like maybe one about filtering the data, one about making a pie chart, one about deciding what kind of graph to make. Is that the kind of thing, or is it really just the TUVA mechanics?
I think I'd like them to be able to see where some of the features are when they forget, or I'm still bumbling around with it.
Sure.
And less about maybe designing a question, because I think I can handle that in the classroom, or that will evolve in the classroom, but really where things are on the screen.
Okay.
Because an 80-minute class can easily turn into, we accomplished 5 minutes worth of work because everybody was lost on the screen for most of the time.
Right.
Which is unfortunate.
And even though it's pretty intuitive, a lot of the features are not apparent if you have no idea that you can do that.
You're also talking, I'm going to be working with 9th graders, and you're also talking about people who don't necessarily they know how to intuitively maneuver on a screen, but they don't really know the difference between a scatter plot, a bar chart. Those are all where we're developing right now.
Okay.
They might even be mixing them up in their heads at that point.
And that's where I was thinking, I'm wondering if you could do, I don't know, Molly, I don't know if it was you where I got it from, that double-sided that showed each graph and when you use those graphs. Wasn't that from you, I think?
Yep, the graph choice chart.
Yeah. That might be nice, little blurbs, a 5 minute, 2 minute even of videos on those. That would be really nice.
Okay.
Because I'm the same way. I don't think the kids know what kind of graph to use for certain things. I think that's a big hiccup.
Okay.
And just another idea, Molly, I don't know if you saw 2 days ago, Tuva sent out an email that announced the launch of like a data literacy and NGSS formative assessment modules. And I actually looked through some of those, and the way that those are designed are really awesome in like helping students and like actually tangibly leading them through via the questions in Tuva as an assignment, leading them through how to manipulate the data and like having them like look for, like it literally says like click on stats, then click on this, and it like very coherently leads students through how to do some of these things. I would love to see something like that for us with the arsenic data set, something that like actually leads students through some of these basic things in Tuva as an assignment. And then as a teacher, we could then assign that set of questions, that assignment to the students, and then they could go through it as a module and learn that way and learn by doing it.
Great. So that's one thing we might think in the long term for the project, that some of those little inquiries that we could put in that format might come from you guys. So you might find that your students just did a really neat little inquiry, and that would be good. We can certainly work together to put that into that kind of format. So,
and Molly, I wouldn't worry too much about revealing too much about the data.
Okay.
Because they're young. and unless you write the paper for them, there's still a lot of thinking to go on, even if they've already seen it from you once.
Right.
They don't necessarily, you know, anybody only listens about 10 minutes out of every 15 anyway. So, you know, I wouldn't worry about that. We can always tell you if something went too far, but I'd rather have you put stuff out there. Yeah.
Great. This is really helpful. So we'll, maybe what a good strategy would be is to, let me take a stab at a couple of these and float them to you. We'll announce it in Anna will post it in the thing, and I'm not sure where we'll host them somewhere. So I mean, we'll figure out how to do that. And then try them out. And then is there any use in planning another one of these kinds of sessions, maybe in a month or a month and a half, or you'll all be in a different place by then. So you may have different kinds of questions. I don't know. That seemed like a reasonable idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can also send a follow-up poll, Molly, after this, where people can speak more freely, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, good idea. Good. Okay, well, we just have a couple minutes. If there's any more little ideas or fill-ins, feel free to email or pipe up at any time. With Anna's around all the time. I don't necessarily always respond immediately, but because I have other hats I wear, but we will get back to you. And if you have any technical issues with Tuva, just email the support at Tuva right away, because they'll respond very quickly. Anything else, Jane or Anna? Do you have anything else to add?
Okay. Thanks.
So the workspace works for people when you get those announcements from Lab Central, and Molly gives you a little like tip for the day in there. That works for you too? We've just changed, I don't know if you've noticed, but we've changed the workspaces, so when you get an email, it says who it's from, and it gives you like the title and a little information, so it's not sort of an anonymous Lab Central posting. So I don't know if you've noticed that change, but that was just so that people wouldn't kind of delete it, not knowing whether it was a reminder about a workshop or whether or not it was a tip from Molly. You just couldn't tell what those workspace announcements were. So now there's more detail on those, and that's why.
I know that if you just delete it right away and it's from me, that I don't have to do it anymore.
I actually do have one question while you're all here. For those of you that have gotten data back, do you know if your students have gone on to Anecdata and checked their samples on their own, or
their parents?
Or their parents, yeah.
I know for a fact mine haven't, because it's been like midterms here, so I didn't want to confuse all that. So I'm waiting literally till like Monday to tell them, and then we'll send out the word, and then it'll get started. I already got my letter that says, "Oh, I'm in the red," so the letters are coming out.
Yeah, for everyone who has an exceedance, we are sending letters. So
I got one coming in the mail, is what you're saying?
If you have an exceedance, yeah.
I'll be honest, I just met yesterday with a mediation. It's going to cost me $1,000.
Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, but cancer costs more.
And now the next step is trying to help fund some of these things for those of us who have over the limit.
You know, that's one of the things back in the day when we had the EPA grant and we were trying to get the teachers and students to work on a strategic plan after they got their data, something that they could share with their community. And I thought that students might come up with ideas to have fundraisers and what have you to help offset costs for people who needed to buy pitcher filters or needed household mitigation, but those kinds of ideas didn't really pop out of those exercises. One thing I do want to tell you, and I'm going to be putting this on the workspace tonight, and the hour is late. I just found out about it. But there is some legislation that's being introduced in Maine that would provide funds for our state lab to be able to run arsenic tests at no cost for low-income families. And that's just a start. But I'll send you the information. There's a hearing in Augusta on Monday. Wouldn't it be fun to have kids at the hearing?
So two things, that the hearing you can actually attend virtually. You can hear it online.
I didn't know.
I just found that out. So it's at 10 a.m. on Monday, and I'll send that link around. And you can also write testimony if you want. It's really late. I'm sure they'll have another one at some point, but that would be a good action. The data to action part would be having students write testimony. So
It's funny that you mentioned that, Jane, because I'm going back through old emails, and Sergio from something invited me to ask if I would go talk about that on Monday. I'm like, oh, that's in like 3 days.
Yeah,
we just found out about it too. I don't know why the word didn't come out sooner that this hearing was happening, but I'm sure there's plenty of time for people to send written comment. It doesn't have to all necessarily come in the day of the public hearing. And then the other provision of that bill, and I will send that as well, is that, and it's very broad language, and somebody must have intentionally wanted it that way, but they want the state to begin to consider the maximal contaminant level based on current research. So I think that this is a baby step toward lowering from 10 to 5. But that's not explicit in there. It's more just requiring that we make decisions at the state level based on current research. So that's what that bill looks like. And we'll send it all around because it is interesting, even if you're not doing much policy work with your students right now. Something to get involved in later.
Great. Well, I think we're at our time limit here, so maybe we should sign off. But thank you all for your input. It's really valuable. And so you can look for the first little mini video sometime soon.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Molly.
Yeah, thank you, Molly.
I'm missing you all. It's so good to see you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll see you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop recording.